Welcome to Painting Together with Acrylics. I'm Gigi Chen and welcome to my art studio in New York City. So I'm really excited to be painting with you guys today with acrylics, and we're going to be keeping an eye on detail this week. We're going to be painting this eye, and we're going to talk about the significance of how little details can make a painting really amazing and really lush and really beautiful. So this week I also want to talk to you about how Artist Network has a acrylic contest, a yearly contest called Acrylic Works. And you can see the description below. You're going to see some details on how to enter our yearly acrylic contest, and when you get featured in the yearly magazine about the winners of the Acrylic Works contest. So let's get started on painting today. So I want you to look down your description below. You're going to see a list of our art supplies for today. And let's get going. And here is our, let me show you, this is my, my prep painting to show you guys what we'll be using. So we're going to be also going through our palette together. So you guys can start off with really, I have this white, I have a cadmium yellow light, I have yellow ochre, I have burnt sienna, I have red, I have red, I have a purple, and I have burnt umber, some Payne's gray, some cadmium orange, and some black. So I kind of mixed up my palette a little bit. So I don't want you guys to feel intimidated by all the colors that I have here. Like if you guys have a regular white, some brown, like whatever you guys have. I don't want you to feel restricted by all the colors that I have here, because in a lot of ways these are all kind of primary colors. And you guys can mix up anything as you go. And I'm mostly using Utrecht, but you guys can really use any brand that you want. I don't want you to feel intimidated by anything that's going on over here. So if you have any questions, please ask on the sidebar, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can. So I'm also working on wood. So let me just switch over. So here is my blank space. You guys can use anything you want. I really like to use wood, but you guys can use canvas. You guys can use a pretty tough mixed media paper if you want. Anything you feel, anything that you're comfortable with. You guys don't even have to, I would prefer you guys to use acrylics, but I know that sometimes some of my viewers like to use a lot of different things. But for this, we're going to be using acrylic paint, and I'm going to be using a variety of brushes, and we're just going to kind of go over everything together as we go. So what I have here is my drawing is already pre-done, and I want to say that there is a video down below in the description that shows how I transferred like a photograph onto my surface. But you don't have to do that. We're going to freehand it together also, because that's what we do. I don't want you guys to feel intimidated if you guys didn't already have a drawing. So down below is going to be the reference picture, and I want you to download that and check that out and look at that while we follow along and paint together. I'm also using some medium, so I keep it on a little jar, right, a little cap right here. But we're going to be using some open acrylic matte medium. It's medium that is matte. You could also use glossy. If you don't have any of these things, it's okay. If you don't have a medium, you can just use water. So I suggest you guys having a rag, a variety of paintbrushes, and a little jar of water, because you know you're going to want to put your brush in there every time you use it and you're not using it. You want to keep your paintbrushes fairly clean. So how about we get going? I'm going to take a pointy brush, and we're just going to do a quick freehand of the painting. I'm also going to make this a little brighter so you guys can see it. The days are getting shorter, guys, and I want you guys to be able to see what we do. The days are getting shorter, and it's already dark here in New York City. All right. And where is everybody from? Oh, hello, Liz Miller. Nice to see you again. Hi, Adele. Hello, guys. Pennsylvania, Puerto Rico. I love it. I love it. How many of you guys are actually painting along with me, and how many of you guys are just watching and hanging out? Okay. So I'm going to take this pointy brush, this like round brush, and I'm just going to take this umber, this burnt umber, and we're just going to do a quick sketch together. As I said, I already have a pre-transfer drawing, and you can figure out how to do that by looking at the video that's in the description, and that will be a little how-to on how to transfer a photograph like full size onto your canvas. And I'm just going to do I'm going to do a little outline. I'm going to do the top of the eye. I was really excited about doing this with you guys today. This was a very challenging one even for myself, but I'm hoping that we can do this all along together, and I'm hoping that I can do it again, right? I'm going to do an outline first. I'm going to do a little tear duct. So I'm not a super expert on anatomy, but I'll try my best. And if you guys know a lot about the eyes, you guys totally shout it out on the sideboard and let us know what you guys know about it. Maybe some fun facts about the eye. So doing the top, I'm going to demarcate where the lid's going to be for my umber. Go. Oh, I love it. Hello, Liz Miller. I'm so glad that you are painting along with me again. Now, how many of you guys are super, super beginners, and how many of you guys have painted a lot before in acrylics? And if you haven't painted acrylics, I want to know what else you guys work with. Okay, here we go. I'm just sort of blocking it in. And remember, if you guys haven't already, please download the reference image. And you could download that down below in the show description. Let's see, along with all of the materials that we're using for the show. Okay, I'm going to just sort of demarcate where some of this is going to be. So as I said, I'm cheating a little bit because I already had my image transferred. That's why we're going to paint it. We're going to do the outline together first. Okay. I'm mostly using this umber just, and you know, whatever you do, even if you kind of mess up, you can paint it over later because this is acrylics and it dries, and that's the beauty of using acrylics. And I do this anyway. When I freehand, I kind of block everything in as well, with or without a drawing. I tend to block everything in darks. So I prefer to paint with acrylics from dark to light. So that's why it's really okay to start demarcating everything with like a dark line, because we're going to paint over it anyway. So I'm going to draw the eye. Going to just outline it. So remember, this eye is sort of like 3/4. It's not full frontal, so this is not going to be, say, a full circle, right? This is just going to be a bit of an oval. So we're painting, put the pupil in, just demarcate it. And this is generally the process that I use when I make any of my paintings. I like to block everything and make sure it's all there. And of course we can change it, but I like to have a guide set up for myself before I make anything. Let's see, here we go. Oh, Sue Bag's Art Studio. You are a beginner with colored pencil. I love it. I love colored pencils. Colored pencils are actually one of my favorite tools. In fact, I would say that I am much more of a natural person who draws than I am a painter. Like for me, I think for a lot of people, certain things come a little bit easier for them. Like for me, painting is a struggle. So it's kind of great that I'm teaching it, because even as I'm teaching it, I get to learn a little bit more about it, you know? I love to paint. I would say that I probably started drawing very much earlier than I did painting. But at the same time, like, I don't think it's really bad to struggle with something, right? I don't really think it's a bad thing to have to struggle with something, because if you really want to do it, you learn it. You kind of work. That's why we're all here together. Let's see. Great. I love that you're watching it. I love that you guys are some of you guys are just kind of hanging out and watching it, and that's really awesome. And I hope some of you guys paint along with it later. Let's see. Hello, Pat from Florida. Oh, hello, Ottawa, Canada. And remember, if you guys have any questions, it would be really much easier for me to see in the chat if you ask it in cap locks so I can see it in capital letters so I can see it better, because otherwise it's really hard for me to see what's a question and who's just kind of talking to each other and saying hi. Hello? Hello from Ontario. Hello. Okay, so we are just going to do some demarcating, and I'm going to take a little bit of water and just sort of mark that this is going to be a little bit darker. Sometimes even when you do a painting, when you've done a painting before, the second time it's still going to be fairly challenging, because eyes are not that easy. But I really wanted to do this with you guys. So we're just demarcating things. I'm just going to mark off some parts that I know are going to be dark. And I'm looking at my reference picture. I'm also looking at my own previous painting. But I hope you guys have downloaded the reference picture so you can paint along with me. Okay, so here we go. I'm just going to demarcate some areas. And also a lot of this I'm going to end up freehanding later. But I just wanted to kind of mark it out so it's a little easier for me to see later. Okay, there we go. Okay. Let's see. Just kind of looking through my things. Go make that a little darker. Okay, so I'm going to put my brush in the water, and I'm going to go for a slightly flatter brush, and I'm just going to start blocking in the colors. Okay. Let me see, slightly flatter brush. Okay, so I'm using this like pretty flat brush. So my very well loved paint brushes, I try to keep them in decent condition by cleaning them, but you know, all the paint is pretty much gone on this one. Okay, so I'm going to, oh, hello, Michelle. Michelle's a really good friend of mine. Hello, hello, Michelle. So I'm going to take this umber, and I'm going to just sort of sweep it through and mark out places that are a little darker. Just going to block it in. So I put a little bit of water in it. So I'm just going to lay in some colors. So with acrylics, I like to work from dark to light. I actually kind of think that that is a pretty good strategy because you are going to be layering anyway. So I really like to put an emphasis on the idea of layering for all painting. You know, you even do it with watercolors, and I know it's always not as obvious with watercolors because it looks like you're just kind of putting down a layer of color. But you know, with really good realistic watercolors are layered, and acrylic paintings are layered a little bit at a time, and so are oil paintings. Okay, so I'm using a little bit of red also because that's what ended up on my palette. So I'm going to just kind of sweep in. Hello, Margaret. Yes, I'm mixing in a little bit of water right now. And I also talked a little about using medium, which I'll talk a little bit more as we go when I do use some medium. So, okay, I'm blocking this in. I'm blocking it in really lightly. I'm adding a little bit more water to this. Maybe a little bit too much water. Sometimes that happens. Okay, so here we go. You see how I'm already kind of layering over the previous brown layer, and you can always see that's already getting darker. Okay, here we go. Go to. Oh, hello, Chris. How are you? So good to see you again. Are you painting along today, Chris? Okay. Oh, hello, John from California. Yes, slowly follow along. You don't need to be painting as fast as I am. In fact, you can totally go back later and take your time. Like, not everyone can just bang out a painting in 2 hours. So it's really great that you guys are watching and just hanging out with me. Hello, Dan. Good to see you. Hello. Okay, so I'm just gonna layer that up a little bit and add a little bit of water. And I'm just going to block this part in, knowing that it's going to be a little bit darker. I'm also going to add a little bit of this purple into my brown, and I'm going to layer that in. Purple's not always an obvious color, right? Sometimes we think that when we darken something, we just like add black or maybe a darker tone of a color, you know, like a light brown into, or dark brown, you know. But I like to use, I want to teach you guys how to use these alternate colors. Like in a lot of ways, the brown and the purple look very, very close to each other. So I like to use purple. Actually, I use purple a lot, actually, in what I do. I like to use purple as like an alternative to just using black. And I generally don't use a ton of black in my own paintings, not because I don't like black, but because I like to, adding a little bit of color adds a little bit of depth to these paintings. So I'm just adding, I'm just gonna sweep that in a little bit more, a little purple and brown. Remember, don't worry about the kind of the brands that you're using for this paint. Just like I don't want you to worry about the brands you're using of like paintbrushes for this, because I want you guys to feel like this is totally accessible. That's why I kind of use in a lot of ways very almost primary colors. You know, I use a lot of yellows, I use a lot of whites, I use a lot of reds and blues in my painting, because I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by having to get like lots of colors. Do your paints degrade over a long time in storage? I don't know. I think for some brands can do that. It depends on how you, I don't really have a way that I store them. I mean, I just basically keep them in my apartment. I try not to, I mean, what actually kind of helps, I find, is getting a paint squeezer and like squeezing the paint tubes so that all the paint is kind of together, you know? So you know how you, like even with with like toothpaste tubes, you kind of roll it up. And I find that having all the wet paint together like is pretty helpful, you know. But I think that there are some brands that do degrade. I'm just going to imagine, but I don't want you to think that this is true. That maybe some of the more, depending on the brands, some of them last a little bit longer than others, and sometimes they dry in the tube. But that's pretty unusual. If you have the cap on, you probably won't have that much of a problem. Okay, let's see. I'm just gonna do that. I'm going to go and take a little bit more of that purple and spread that out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start creating little skin tones. Hello, Angus from England. How are you? Are you painting along today? Okay, I'm going to just do that. And right, I'm going to clean my brush a little bit. I'm going to try to mix up something that's like relatively a flesh color. I'm going to take some umber. And remember, I'm going to do this in layers, so this is going to look pretty weird at first. I'm going to take some umber, some ochre, and I'm going to mix that together. And I'm going to take a little bit of the red and mix that in a little bit. And a tiny bit of the white, mix that in. If you guys need to see my palette, I could also move those reference pictures so I can take them out. So just let me know. That might actually be helpful. I'm going to just click out that reference picture. So if you guys don't have the reference picture, you guys can download it when you're down below. Down below in the show description is all the downloads for this particular show, including some information about entering Artist Network's yearly acrylic works contest. And you should look at that too. So I'm going to take this color. So I mixed some umber, some ochre, and some white, and some red. And I'm just going to start, oh, that's a little bit dark. I'm going to add a little bit more white to that. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of cadmium to lighten that up. And I'm just going to start going over. How many of you guys have painted an eye before? It's pretty challenging, I think. I'm going to add a little bit more white, a little bit more yellow, cadmium yellow. And I'm just going to start to lighten up this area a little bit. Just to kind of fill it in. Oh, hello, Australia. It's one of my dreams to go and visit Australia. Some of the most beautiful birds live there, and I really want to go visit them. Add a little bit more white to that. I'm just going to start to lighten up this part. So remember, paintings look really, really weird for a pretty big chunk of its existence before it becomes really beautiful. So I don't want you guys to feel intimidated right now if it looks really, really weird, because my painting looks very, very weird. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit of water and just kind of move that paint around a little bit better. Let's see, here we go. Just going to keep going with this. I'm going to add a little bit of medium to kind of extend it a little bit. So when I add medium, it's a really great way to sort of extend the paint. And sometimes when you add water, it dilutes it, and the medium sort of extends it a little bit, meaning that I can kind of move it around a little bit better. And it doesn't sort of degrade the paint too much. It doesn't make it watery. Okay. So we're going to just do that, and I'm just going to bounce around this painting. So if you guys are working on your own, whether or not you're following me along, like I think it's really important to bounce around the painting so you don't overwork anything. So we haven't even touched, you know, the main event yet. Like I just want to block in this paint with you. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more white to this, and some yellow. Just going to keep mixing. I don't have my palette knife today, so we're going to be mixing with my brush today. So a little bit of white, and a little bit more of the red, a little bit more white. And then I'm just going to start to block in the rest of this eye. Okay. And I'm going to add a little bit of water. Just kind of move that a little bit. So depending on the kind of paint you're using, you may or may not need as much water. Like I'm working with a pretty heavy body paint. So every now and then I do need to like add a little dash of water into it. Do you guys have any particular brands that you guys like to use? So I'm just blocking this in, and then eventually I'm going to lighten it up. Oh, so someone's asking about my surface. I'm using up a piece of wood that I actually got from a hardware store. I mean, there's a lot of, you can buy like pre-sized panels in the art store. You can also go to a hardware store and get something cut for you to size. And this is a pre-primed panel that the hardware store actually was selling, so that was pretty great. That meant that I didn't have to gesso it myself. You guys don't have to use wood. I know some of you guys don't like, depending on what kind of surface you guys like totally you guys can use whatever you want. Like I prefer wood just because it's really smooth. You guys, if you want to be using a good mixed media paper or canvas, I'm sure a lot of you guys are working on canvas. You guys can really use anything you want, like anything that makes you feel comfortable. Like that's the whole point of this show. I want you guys to feel super comfortable about using what you like and what you already have. Like I don't want any of you guys coming into the show feeling like you need to have all the fancy things. So I'm going to add a little bit more white and a little bit of this red and make kind of a pink. My background is white, actually, so it could just be your phone, but also the light in here keeps changing because I am using the window light and I'm also using these lights around me. So hopefully, even though the sun is setting earlier, that it won't get too dark, but I can change my ISO for on the camera if you need. If you guys see something you don't like, if it's too dark. But I'll keep a check on that. So I'm using like a pink, and I'm going to just start sweeping in under the eye, meaning I used the red and the white, and I made a pink. Let's see. Annette Curry, what kind of stuff do you like to paint? Since you're saying that you paint a lot. Yeah, tell me what you guys like to paint. Like we're gonna be doing a few more, we're gonna be doing some animals later on in the season. We're gonna be painting a bird. We're gonna be painting some jellyfish next time. So we're gonna try, I mean, those are my favorite things to draw actually. I also really love to paint and draw people, but my favorite thing is actually to draw animals. Now, someone here is asking where you guys can follow my work. So it's my name. It's Gigi Chen. On Instagram, it's gigichen.art. So that's really easy to find. So it's just my name, gigichen.art, and that is my Instagram name. So you guys can kind of see what else I like to do, but mostly I like to paint birds. So those are kind of my favorite things to paint. And I kind of wish I could travel right now to kind of go visit some birds from other lands. Okay. So I'm adding a little bit of yellow into this mix, some white, and I'm just going to start to lighten up some of this a little bit. I'm going to use some medium. And as I said, if you guys don't have the medium, you guys can use a little bit of water, but not too much. There we go. By using the medium, you can kind of maintain a little bit of the elasticity of paint. Like when you use water, it waters it down, literally. Okay, so I'm going to go into this brown mix that I made, and I'm going to go and fill in the rest of this. I don't know how much of my palette you can actually see, but I sort of have like several shades of browns that I keep here. Like I have, I'll move this over. I have like this mix, which is a little darker, which is mostly the red, the umber, and the white, and some ochre, and this one has a little bit more yellow, and this one has a little bit more yellow. So like whatever, hopefully that was helpful. So I have like 3 different shades, but honestly we're in the first layer. It doesn't even matter too much like what you're doing. Like as long as you're filling in the space with just the right tones, like it's not that big of a deal what it looks like right now, because we are totally in the super ugly duckling phase where the painting looks insane and doesn't look like anything. So I'm just kind of filling it in with these different shades of brown. And that's why, you know, I mean, the whole idea of making a really interesting acrylic painting is to build up layers in order to make everything come alive. Like we're not just going to try to get it in on the first pass. And I really like to emphasize that during the show, because I think that sometimes we feel like, oh, you know, something looks really weird right now and I give up. And I used to do that before I knew how to paint, before I learned how to paint. But you know, you do it and you keep building up layers, you keep building up layers until suddenly it looks almost like a sculpture on your own canvas. So we're adding a little bit of red. We're adding a little bit of red too. So I'm taking a little bit of this, which is mostly umber, ochre, and cadmium, and some white, and I'm mixing it in with a little bit of my red. And I'm going to use that to create the under eye, to paint into the under eye. There we go. So under the lid, that's what I'm doing. Just painting in under the lid. Isn't that kind of cool? Like I really want to teach you guys how to use colors that you don't expect to be using, right? Like I think we kind of want to, you know, use darker shades of something in order to darken it, but I want to teach you guys how to use a little bit of like these other colors, like the purples and the reds, to kind of create a little bit of something. Okay, so I'm still using a little bit of this pink red, and so now we have that, but I'm going to fill that part in with you now. I'm going to take this yellow mixture, this peach mixture, and I'm going to add a little bit of pink to it. A little bit of red to it, a little bit of white. I wish that I could teach you guys a little bit more of like how to make a very orderly palette, but my palettes are never orderly. Oh my goodness. And a little bit of white. And I'm just gonna fill this part in. Maybe a little bit more yellow, right? Maybe a little bit more ochre. And you guys can post your pictures on the Artist Network website. I saw that some people have occasionally been, some of you guys actually have been Instagramming me your pictures, which is actually kind of cool too. But you can also post on the show pages for each of these episodes, like what you've done. And that's so exciting when I get to see that. Like last week we did space and someone sent me a picture of their painting and it was amazing. Like you guys are really, really talented. Like there's nothing more amazing for me because I'm teaching in a room by myself and I'm teaching to you guys like out into the ether, right? And sometimes I'm not quite sure, like I'm interacting with you guys here, but sometimes I'm not really sure if how many of you guys are actually painting, what you guys are actually doing. And then every now and then someone sends me a picture and it just totally makes my day. Like, I want you guys to make my day and show me things. So I'm using a little bit more of this brown, and I'm just going to keep filling this in. Like, I would love to see what you guys do. So they're going to post, Artist Network's going to post a little link about where you guys can show your work off. It would make me so happy. And if any of you guys have work from the previous classes, I would just love to see it. Because it really, for me, because I'm in a room by myself and I'm teaching you guys online, sometimes there's a little, like I'm trying to like bridge that disconnect a little bit more. Because like when I see your work, it really feels like, oh, someone's watching, someone cares, and you guys are like working and maybe you learned something, which is really important to me. Okay, so we're going to fill that in. I'm just going to keep filling it in. Like I don't really need a lot. Right now, I'm just going to fill it in. And then we're going to darken anything, add a little bit of medium, and just sort of move this a little bit. Okay. Oh, Luis, you like to paint animals and people, landscapes. Those are all the most fun things to do. Like, as I said, animals are some of my favorite things to do, and we are going to paint some animals during this show, you know. I have a really amazing friend in Canada that sends me pictures of her chickens. We're going to paint some chickens at some point because they're kind of amazing. And I grew up in the city, so I didn't spend a lot of time with chickens. So I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. And so we're just going to leave that for now. I'm just going to, not to futz around too much, but we're going to leave that and we're going to start filling in the eyeball. Oh, let me fill this part in. I missed this part. I'm going to take a little bit of white and make a little pink. And I'm just going to fill that part in a little bit. When you guys first start painting, I want you guys to chill out with it and just ease yourself in by just filling it in. Like, you know, I'm sure a lot of you guys did coloring books when you were kids, right? Sometimes I like to think of the first layer as just filling in a coloring book without thinking too much. You don't even have to like, you know, stay in the lines too much. Okay. So I'm just going to fill this part in a little bit more. And it looks pretty ugly right now, but that's okay. Like, that's like totally okay for your painting to look kind of weird and hideous first. So let's just enjoy how hideous it is right now, and eventually it's going to be really beautiful. Okay, so I'm still using the same flat brush. You guys can use really any brush you want. Okay. Oh, someone here is from Trinidad. Amazing. Are you painting with us today? Kevin, are you painting with us today? So I'm going to take a little bit of this white and just sort of put it in to that brown mixture that I had. And I'm just going to fill in this part of the eye. It's not too crazy. We're going to put more things there soon. So I'm just like flatly filling it in. Here we go. There we go. I'm going to take a smaller brush. Let's see. I'm going to take a pretty small flat brush as I said, you guys, it doesn't really matter what brands you guys are using. I don't even really can tell what brand there is that I'm using because there's paints all over the handle. So I'm going to take a little bit of my red and putting it with the white, and I'm going to just add a little bit of an outline here to demarcate the edges. So I'm doing it really softly. Go. Putting that in pretty softly. And here too. I'm going to use a little bit of water. Just outline that. Do the inner eye. Great. And then we're going to paint the other side. So let me get back into my flat brush. I'm going to clean my flat brush. So I want you guys to use whatever brushes you feel really comfortable with. Let's see. So I'm going to take my Umber and add a little bit of this purple and add a tiny, tiny bit of white. And I'm just going to fill this part in. So this whole part of the eye is in shadow. Just going to fill it in. I'm not even going to try to do anything else to it, but fill it in. Okay. Sometimes I don't mix enough paint, but that's okay. I'm just going to use a little bit of water and just kind of move it around a little bit. Sometimes no matter how much you paint, you still sort of make the same mistakes. Like sometimes I don't mix enough paint, and sometimes I need to reconstitute everything with water and try to get everything to go. It's funny because sometimes no matter how much I've painted, I still make a lot of mistakes. I still get a little bit lost when I start anything, you know? That's why it's really nice to sort of embrace the beginning stages of a painting. Because you can kind of enjoy, I like to think of the beginning stages of a painting as like a warm-up, right? Like you sort of like warming up to do something excellent, but you know, you don't like, you know, dancers don't dance perfectly the first couple of hours that they're together, that they're working, you know, even runners have to warm up. So I like to think of the first set of this, the first like layer of this painting as like a warm-up. So I'm going to take this ochre. I'm going to put a little bit of water in it, and I am just going to because I put a little bit of water in it, the paint's a little translucent, so you can still kind of see the drawing underneath. I'm going to just fill in the whole thing. And we're going to do this layer by layer, guys. This is like no joke. Still, the painting looks still pretty ugly, and that's okay. Like the ugly duckling phase is like really great because that's when you like grow the most. Okay. It's funny, sometimes, even though I painted a lot, sometimes the ugly duckling phase still like trips me up a little bit. You know, it makes me kind of want to quit paintings, and that's definitely happened before. And I actually painted this a couple of times because I was trying out different materials to try to paint this picture for you guys, and then I didn't. Sometimes things don't work out, you know, and then you have to do it again. Okay. Are any of you guys experts at drawing and painting the eye? Like, I want to know that. Do you guys know anything fun about the eye that I don't know about? So I'm just using this ochre to fill it in. So this is still going to be pretty wet, but I'm going to start taking I'm going to go back to my small flat brush. I'm going to go back to my small flat brush. I'm going to take some burnt sienna, and I'm going to try to shade in. My burnt sienna is fairly translucent. Let's see. I'm just going to try to do this a little bit with you guys. Okay, I'm taking a little bit of ochre, and I'm just going to, actually I'm taking a little bit of ochre and mix it in with the burnt sienna. And I'm just going to fill in, still filling in, like it still doesn't look amazing. It looks pretty, still pretty hideous. Taking the sienna, put a little bit of ochre in it, and I'm just going to start filling in. So I'm using a small flat brush, but you guys can use anything that you feel comfortable with. Just going to fill that part in. I'm going to take a little bit of this burnt umber and just continue to fill this part in. So it's a little bit wet, and I'm probably pushing the paint around a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to go back into the burnt sienna, a little bit of ochre and the burnt sienna, and I'm going to just outline. And I'm not using, because the burnt sienna is not very thick, I'm basically kind of just layering over a little bit. So it's not like I'm covering anything really. Like, you don't really start covering things until like maybe you kind of go over it a couple of more times. So let's do an outline. Let's see. Adding a little bit of sienna and ochre. Just building up these layers. What's really nice is the ochre is a little thicker, so I'm going to go back into the yellow ochre and just use that to go into another layer of this. Just keep painting. I'm just going to go into the ochre again. And I'm just kind of going in circular motions. So I like to think of because the eyeball is actually like a circle. You know, it's actually a sphere. So I'm painting this way. Like obviously every now and then we're going to be painting the other way. We're going to paint like this way. But for now I want you guys to remember always that the eyeball is a sphere. So I'm going to be painting around. Add a little bit more umber. And we're going to work on this together. We're going to work on the eye until I feel like we need to like move ahead, because I want to be able to work on the rest of it too. So I'm taking the umber and I'm also going to take some of this purple and go underneath the eye. What's kind of great is that I'm using purple because purple is a complement on the color wheel of the yellow. So putting them next to each other, pops out the other. Okay. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush a little bit. Hello. Hello, someone from Uruguay. That's awesome. See. I'm going to I'm still just building up the layers. I'm taking out now a little bit of the cadmium yellow light, and I'm just going to start to lightly brush that in. And cadmium yellow light is also super translucent. So it's a perfect color to be layering over things. And you know, the eye is not like a perfect, the designs in the eye are not like these like perfect little colors, right? There's a lot of speckles in it. And so having even some of these imperfections here in the eye so far, that's actually really going to be advantageous to us. Okay. I'm just filling that in, taking a little bit more of the cadmium yellow light and I mean, when you look at the picture of the eye, so if for any of you guys who haven't yet, the reference is down below in the description of the show. So you can download the reference and you can kind of paint along and see what we're doing together, like whether or not you're going to do it now or do it later. That's where the reference picture is. I'm going to take a little bit of this medium and just brush that over. And even when you look at the reference picture, there are so many little imperfections in the eye, like little things in the eye. That's why this particular episode is about details and how little details can really make a picture sing. Okay, there we go. I'm going to go back into the burnt sienna. Oh, that's too much. I have a rag on my lap. So having a rag is really important. I think that's like a super important tool. And sometimes I have a little too much paint on my brush and I have to blot it. So taking the sienna and going around. Medium. And go. Go back into the purple and just gonna keep outlining the eye, outlining the iris, go a little bit more. Cool. And remember, if any of you guys have any questions, ask in caps on the side so I can see it better. If you guys have any painting questions or material questions, or any artist questions, I suppose, you guys can ask each other or ask me. There you go. Okay, I'm going to leave that alone for a second, and we're going to work a little bit more on the rest of it. So I'm going to go back to my flat brush and clean my flat brush. Go. Glow. So this is my flat brush. And I'm going to go into, we're going to start to lighten this area. So I'm going to go into, I'm going to take some, let's see, some umber and some white. Umber, some white, some red. Mix that in and add some cadmium. Some white. Just kind of mix that in. And a little bit more of this white, and I'm going to take a little bit of this medium, tiny bit of medium, and I'm going to use that to lighten, take some, actually a little bit more white. I'm going to start lightening these areas, and maybe a little bit more yellow, a little bit more cadmium, a little bit more cadmium yellow light, and just going to start to lighten under the eye. And remember, you guys can use any brush. I like to use this brush, this medium flat brush to sort of like work around, just because it's a little faster, because we're trying to finish off these big areas, so it's nice to kind of, it is nice to kind of get through these areas quickly. There. There we go. And I'm going to go back into my umber with this red. And I'm going to add another layer while all this is still kind of wet and kind of blend it in together. And go back into the yellow and the white. And really, while some of this is, I have a lot of water and medium on my brush, and while this is all pretty wet, I am brushing over and giving it another layer. I'm going to take a little bit of my red and add that to that mixture. And so this part's going to be a little bit more pink. So already this part's coming to life. Yes, hopefully. I'm going to take a little bit more of this red and add it to my umber. A little bit of that peachy color, and I'm just going to start to add some more colors this way under the eye. Use a little bit more medium. I actually tend to use a pretty significant amount of medium for this particular painting just because I'm working these like bigger areas. But as I said, if you don't have medium, you could use a little bit of water. There. I'm just trying to keep the paint, it kind of helps, the medium kind of keeps the paint kind of wet, and then I can kind of blend a little bit easier, which is really fairly, not difficult to do, but like a little bit more challenging to do with acrylics because they dry so quickly, right? So now, already looking a little bit better. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more. I'm going to take some purple and some of this umber and kind of mix it in together. And I'm going to just fill this part in. So I don't want to fuss way too much on like super detailed background for this because I want to concentrate on the eye, but I still want to give this a pretty good base. So I'm going to use a little bit more purple. I'm just going to darken this part up. It's this purple and this umber, and I'm just going to give that. So now this part's nice and kind of like brought in, like nice and dark. And I'm going to bring in a little bit more of this red, and I'm just going to demarcate like this part of the eye. So there's just a little bit more anatomy there. There, that's kind of cool, right? That's kind of getting there. And I'm going to kind of keep working on this part a little bit. And then I also want to work on the other parts a little bit more too. So I've got this peachy color. I'm going to add a little bit more of this cadmium yellow light, a little bit more white. And I still haven't changed my brush, but I want you guys to feel comfortable changing out your brush if you don't feel super comfortable using a slightly like medium-sized brush for areas like this. So I'm just going to start to just brush that in. Maybe a little lighter, huh? How about just a little bit lighter? Take a little bit of white, paint it in here. I'm just going to use that to lighten out the eye. Kind of losing some of this pink. I'm going to add a little bit more of this red back into this and make a lighter pink. Add a little bit of white. I made a lighter, slightly lighter pink. There we go. That's kind of nice, right? I'm going to use a little bit more medium just to kind of push that around. There we go. A little bit more medium can kind of, I'm able to kind of push the paint around a little bit better because of it without diluting it. A little bit more medium. And you see how with just like a couple of layers, you can like really build it up like it's a, you can really build it up like it's like a sculpture almost. There we go. And I'm painting really in the contours like, because this is like a round, so I'm painting this way. You know, I'm painting in like a round form. I'm painting in like almost like an arc. So already this part is looking pretty good. So I'm going to take a little bit more white, put it in that pink, and maybe a tiny bit of that purple. And I'm going to just sort of sweep in this edge of the eye, which I probably will end up doing again later because I've got to do everything a bunch of times before we can get it right. Okay. I mean, for any of you guys who have like worked with me before, I really emphasize the idea that you have to paint something over a couple of times in order to get it right. Like the beginning stages of anything is not great, you know, not always that great. You're lucky. You're super lucky if you can make something look amazing on the first pass. Like I know that I can't. I always have to paint everything over and over and over again before I can get it right. Okay. So I'm just lightening that part out. I'm going to keep that fairly, I'm going to leave it alone right now. I think I want to work on the rest of it. So I'm going to go and take a little bit of this purple into this umber, a little bit of white, and I'm just going to start working from left to right because I am a right-handed artist. I actually heard that there are a lot of artists that are lefties, right? I actually have known a significant amount of people who are artists that are left-handed. Like I'm not, but I'm kind of surprised. Maybe that's like a thing, even though they're kind of minority, you know? I'm shocked at how many artists I know that are left-handed. So I'm just using a little bit of this purple, some umber. So, you know, because I'm a right-handed artist, I tend to work from left to right. So I'm going to take a little bit of this Sienna, mix it in with this purple, and go in, maybe a little bit of white into this purple and Sienna mix, and paint. Maybe that's a little bit dark, but that's okay. And now a little bit more white into that. A little bit more white into that, and maybe a little bit of ochre. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of medium into that and just sort of try to use that to layer over what I already have. So already this part's getting a little bit more finished, or rather a little bit more developed. We're not finished yet, nowhere close. We're going to take a little bit of the purple and a little bit of the sienna, and I'm going to mix that in, and I'm just going to go over this part a little bit, right over the lid. I'm just going to put that out there a little bit more. Oh, thank you, Patty. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, watch it later. So this recording, so even though we're live right now, you can watch the recording later. And I really want you guys to also post the work that you do. So there's going to be a link in the show page. I mean, they're going to put up a link actually here for you to put up where you want to show your work, you know. So there's a place where you can post your work so everyone can see it. And, you know, for those of you who are shy, there have been people who have been, private messaging me your pictures, and that's also really totally okay. You know, not everybody wants to, like, make everything they do super public, which is also fine. I'm not hard to find on Instagram, so you guys can always message me. So I'm going to lighten this part up a little bit. I'm going to use a lot of this, like, mix that I made with like a fleshy color. And I'm just, with a lot of, there's quite a bit of water and quite a bit of medium on my brush, and I'm just mixing, I'm just brushing this in. I'm just brushing it in. So the paint is still fairly, I would say fairly wet, because I have a lot of medium on my brush. And if you don't have medium, you can totally just use a little bit of water, but not too much water. But I highly suggest that you guys look into getting a medium in the finish that you like. There's like glossy medium, I prefer to use the matte just because I prefer my paintings not to be super shiny. Let me show you that again. Like I use this, I mostly use this, and I have a little dab of it in a little cap, and I put that in there, and I use this to sort of extend the paint, and so the painting doesn't dry as fast. And that's super helpful. So there's a bunch of other ways in which you can extend your paint, but I don't want to make it too complicated for this show. I don't want to make it complicated for you guys. I don't want you guys to have to buy a lot of stuff for this show. But if you can invest in like a little jar, a little tube of it. Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of the Sienna and put it in with this purple, a little bit of this purple, and I'm going to brush this way. So I'm still painting. I'm painting also in like an arc. By painting in an arc, you're kind of maintaining the contours and the shape of the eye, like above the eye. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit, and I want this part to be a little darker, so I'm going to use purple and some umber and mix that in, and I'm going to make this part just darker. Okay, so I want you guys to know that, we got to build up our layers. And we're not going to get a perfect painting the first time. And hopefully maybe in the end we'll have something that's somewhat perfect, But even then I can't promise you, because I can't promise you I'll make a perfect painting by the end of this. Most likely I will not, but I will have tried and maybe taught you guys a little bit something. So I'm going to use a little bit more, some ochre, some white, and I still have some paint on my brush. So I'm going to add a little bit of this red, and I'm just going to mix that in, and I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to work fairly quickly and paint. I'm going to have a little bit more medium, and I'm going to paint this way. Remember, to paint this way, you have to paint this way so you can maintain the shape and the volume of the eye. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of, I'm just going to demarcate this. So I want to keep this part fairly loose, but I'm still going to add a little bit of umber and some brown and just clean that part up a little bit. There we go. See, isn't it nice? I haven't even used any black yet. I'm still just using umber and the purple to create darks. But doesn't that add a lot of depth to it, right? It adds a lot of depth to it that if you just use black, it would probably muddy up some of these colors too. And when you're mixing colors, it's really good to use colors that are kind of similar, in this circle. Like this purple is actually very warm, which is why I've chosen it for this class. And by doing that, you can kind of mix it in with all of these other really pretty, like these other warm colors. And my palettes are still fairly warm, even for these classes. I'm going to take a little bit of this umber mix and go and just sort of get this part a little bit lighter. So if you use it's not saying that you shouldn't use black for any of these paintings. Actually, we are going to use black in this painting. I just don't want you to feel like, oh, to make things darker, you have to use something very particular, So I'm going to add a little bit of white to this. And I want to teach you guys how to think outside of what you normally would use. And I want you to think of like an alternative to a darker color would be something that's like really purple, or a blue. And by doing that, you can really add a lot of depth to your paintings. So I'm going to add a little bit of this Sienna into the white, and I'm going to add a little bit more white. Just keep lightening this up a little bit. So I'm just going to slowly lighten it and lighten it and lighten it. So someone's asking me how I'm keeping my paint from drying. I'm using a medium, and I'm also using water. So I think I talked a little bit about this medium. I'm using this, and this can slow down your paint a little bit. There's also other things that you can use to slow down acrylic paint. Like there's something called a retarder, but I like to use this one because I can use it also to create glazes. But I generally use this, and I also want to keep this class fairly simple. I don't want you guys to have to buy a ton of stuff. let's see, what kind of paint am I using? I actually am using Utrecht, and I'm painting on a piece of wood, so it's a wood panel. And you guys can use anything, but you guys also don't have to use the brands that I'm using. So I'm adding a little bit of white, and I'm going to so I'm not really keeping, the reason why my paint looks like it's not drying is because it's kind of not. By using water and medium, you can really kind of extend the drying time. So now this part, I think this part is pretty good. I mean, it's not perfect, but I want to kind of move on. I like to move around my paintings a lot. So, I mean, it is dry. Actually, most of this is pretty dry, you know, because I didn't use a lot of medium. I didn't use a lot of water for this. So, so it kind of seems like it's not drying, but it does dry. Okay. Let's see. So I think this part looks pretty decent. I'm going to go into the lid, and I'm going to go, still using the same brush, but you guys can switch up brushes. I am going to go into this peach and add some white and add maybe a little bit of this purple. So I made this peachy color with Umber, some ochre. I'm going to add a little bit of ochre too. Some Umber, some ochre, some of this red, and some white. And I'm going to add a little bit more white. And I'm just going to start to, so this part is this is all dry, so I'm going to put my hand right on it. Just to kind of support my hand and not lean my whole body under the camera so it blocks you guys. So I kind of created this very kind of ashy beige because I added a little bit of purple in it. So I'm just using, and I'm really mostly using this flat brush. Let's see. Oh, I don't know about floating medium. I've never heard of floating medium. Is that a brand? Because I mostly use golden, but that's because when I was first learning how to use acrylic paint, I basically taught myself how to use acrylic paint. I walked into an art store and they showed me, I said, oh, there must be, because you know, I actually was trained as an oil painter. So in oil painting, you know that we have mediums. We have linseed oil. We use a whole bunch of stuff to create a medium, or you could just buy a pre-mixed medium. And I went into the store and I asked them, you know, is there an acrylic medium? And the store clerk showed me a whole set of golden mediums, and he was like, you could pick a finish. So people like to use glossy. I don't really like to use glossy too much. And so I mostly use the medium in matte because it makes a little bit more sense to me, because there's a little bit more, like, I don't really like my paintings to be super shiny. And I'm going to go into this, I'm going to mix in this red and burnt sienna. And I'm just going to, because this burnt sienna is not very thick, I'm just sort of going over, using that to fly over this. Oh, somebody's asking me where I'm filming from. I'm in New York City right now. And right now it is 4 p.m. in New York City. I live in Manhattan. I live uptown in Manhattan. So where are you from, Daniel? What country are you in right now? So yeah, this is like a live feed. So if you guys are watching it right now, like, it's directly happening in my apartment right now. And it's really funny. It's really funny to be like filming and doing work from my own apartment. It's like kind of a funny thing. Okay, so I'm still using the same brush. So this part, you see, it's still fairly translucent, so we're going to thicken that up a little bit. I'm going to take my burnt sienna. I'm going to add a little bit of umber and a little bit of this red. And I think my brush might be too wet. I'm going to blot it with my... Okay. And I'm going to just... Oh, that's a little too red. I'm going to add some more umber into that. A little bit more umber. And maybe a little bit of white just to kind of thicken up the paint a little bit. And I'm going to use that too. That's much better. I'm going to use that to just start to work on the fold of the lid and a little bit more white, maybe a little bit more white to it. There, that's so much better. And I'm just going to brush it on. So I'm working pretty quickly. By working pretty quickly, I can kind of avoid the paint kind of drying on me. But even then, that still will happen. Like, that's inevitable. This is acrylic paint. So I'm going to add a little bit more white. And the white takes a little longer to dry too. So that's, sometimes you add a little bit of white and it thickens the paint a little bit because white is very, very thick. You know, and I think if you, I don't know if you guys have ever noticed that when you leave white on your palette, it takes the longest to dry. And a little bit more white. And maybe a little bit of purple in that. How about that? Just kind of make a little lavender color. Oh, I've heard of Albania. Daniel. Hello, Daniel from Albania. Are you painting along today too, Daniel? Or are you just hanging out and watching? So I'm using the flat of my brush, and I'm just starting to make that part above the eye a little lighter. So I'm just kind of like flicking it, and there's not too much paint. I'm almost kind of dry brushing it onto my board. Now remember, we're also going to be adding eyelashes here, so we don't have to work too hard over here, but you know, sometimes we like to do a lot. I'm going to add a little bit more brown back into that because it got a little dark and a little light, so that's a little prettier. I'm going to make this part darker because this is going from light to dark. I'm going to go back into my my ochre. I'm sorry, my burnt umber. Into my purple. And I'm going to make this part just a little bit darker. So for those of you guys who are watching, who are just watching, but you guys can, for those of you guys who are just watching, you could also download the reference picture so you see what we're painting. And that's going to be down below in the description. And I'm going to take a little bit of my medium and I'm just going to sweep that over just so it can kind of blend a little bit better. So we're already getting there, right? So this whole part, this bottom part is really looking pretty good. I'm going to take a little bit of medium. And while I still have the paint on my brush, I am just going to make this part just a little bit darker. I'm going to add a little bit more purple and umber. And I'm just going to glaze this part in. Meaning I'm putting just like a layer of it, not a whole lot of paint. I think you probably realize that I don't use a ton of paint when I paint. I mean, it looks like I'm mixing a lot. I'm mixing a lot of it, but I really haven't gone through even half of what I put down on my palette. And that's because it's really important, because when you're working in layers, you're building things up, so you don't need a ton. So I'm going to take a little bit of this white and this peach, and I'm just going to lighten up this part a little bit. Just going to take a little bit more white, a little bit of yellow, and I'm just going to lighten up this area a lot more. Maybe a little bit of medium, and just going to lighten this part, maybe a little bit of white. A little bit more white to this, and just continuing to lighten up this eyelid. So already it's looking pretty cool, right? You guys are doing okay over there? For those of you guys who are painting with me. So look at that, that's pretty cool. I might make this part just a little bit redder. I'm just gonna add a little bit of this sienna, a little bit of white, and I'm just going to brush lightly. Too much water on my brush. I'm gonna blot my brush on my rag. So I'm just gonna make this part just a little bit. There we go. And maybe I can make it even lighter. I'm going to add a little bit more white and a little bit of this purple and a little bit of this brown and make that even lighter. Oh, maybe too, not dark enough, not light enough, a little bit more white. Just going to, and I still haven't changed my brush out. Maybe I should do that. I kind of like this brush though. I kind of like where this brush is going for me. And yeah, like most of my painting is already dry, so I can put my hand right on the painting. Okay, so let's start working back on the iris and the area around it. So let's work on these parts a little bit more. I'm going to take the umber and the purple, and I'm going to start brushing that part in again. I think my brush is too wet, but here, umber and purple, and maybe mostly a lot of this purple, and maybe a little bit of white, a tiny bit of white. It's funny, at some point my palette is just sort of out of control, guys. There's just so much paint. Let's see. Oh, someone's asking me if I post artwork on other platforms. Yeah, I'm really easy to find. You can look me up on Instagram, on Facebook, and you can see, and no, I'm not on Patreon. I'm not on Pinterest, but I am on Instagram and Facebook, and Instagram is really easy to find me. You just look up my name, Gigi Chen, and my handle is gigichen.art. So it's pretty easy to find me. So for those of you guys who are a little shy to post, like I do, actually, like you could totally send me your pictures because I know I've had a few people do that in the past, and it's really nice. Otherwise, you guys can post on the show page for each of these episodes your work, and I would love to see that. Like no matter what, I like really want to see what you do. So I'm going to make this purple and this umber a little bit lighter by adding a little bit of white and a little bit of ochre, and I'm going to make this part a little bit lighter. So just by doing that, and the paint is still, my paint is still pretty wet. It's because I use a lot of water, and there's some medium in this too. So my paint is kind of moving a lot better right now because I think I want you guys to sort of practice what's like the perfect ratio for you guys to use a little bit of water and medium to kind of make your paintings move a little bit easier. Because like it's really hard for me to explain to you because I don't know an actual ratio. You know, I'm going to use a little bit of white and mix it into this. I don't really know the actual ratio. But for every part of this painting, like I sort of go with the flow and I kind of choose whether I use more medium or use more water, or maybe I just like use straight paint. So that's something that you guys can get used to as you guys use it, as you guys kind of go along and practice on your own. So I'm going to make this part just a little bit lighter. I'm going to make this a little bit lighter, a little bit more white. And just make this part just a little bit lighter, not a whole lot lighter. Yeah, so, you know, even things like the eye, you know, even in the photograph, it can look kind of flat, but even then, you guys can do just a little bit more to it to kind of pop things out. So I'm going to just sort of go into this umber and this purple, and I'm just going to keep filling in this eye. And I'm also going to lighten it as we go because there's still a little bit of paint, a little bit of white on my brush. Isn't it kind of interesting? Now we're kind of getting like to a point where it doesn't look crazy, right? This painting now looks like a painting. It looks more like an eye. It looks more like it's more representing what we're trying to do. Okay, so I'm going to just add a little bit more. Take a little bit more of my medium. And I think out of a lot of my classes, I really have used medium more in this than I have in my other classes because it's sort of an anatomy painting in a lot of ways. I mean, not exactly, obviously, but we're more focusing on layering things up to kind of create like a certain tone, right? Creating skin tones is kind of much harder than, say, creating something for like a fish like we had painted before, you know, because like we're kind of staying in the same colors, we're staying in the same like scheme of colors, but we're still sort of changing it up. Take a little bit more of this brown and this white, and I'm going to just make it a little bit more white and this brown, and I'm going to just play around a little bit with making this part just a little bit more voluminous. And maybe this part's a little bit mottled, so I'm going to add, still wet, that might still be wet. I'm going to take a little bit of this brown, a little bit of the umber and purple, and I'm just going to fill that in some more, even though it's a little bit wet. Sometimes when a painting is wet, it's really hard to move around, so I don't know if I want to fuss with that too much right now while it's still so wet. So I'm just going to try to smooth that over. And I'm going to go back to that. So I'm going to work a little bit more on this side with you. I'm going to clean my brush. I'm still using the same brush, but you guys can change it up. If you guys want me to change it up, I will too. Yeah, definitely. Like the more you build up layers, the more it does feel sculptural. Like I want you guys to think of painting as like an additive thing. Like, you know, sometimes like sculpture is just like a, you're sort of subtracting when you take a piece of stone. But I want you to think of this as like building up with clay, where you're kind of building up like bits of clay together to make something like full. So I want you guys to think of it like that rather than say you're trying to do everything all at once. So, I mean, I really think it's important to learn layering and be comfortable with knowing, be comfortable with sort of like predicting what a painting is going to look like, you know? Okay, so I'm going to go and use the same brush because that's what I apparently am doing. Well, or maybe I'll switch my brush up. I'm going to switch my brush up to using this filbert. But you guys don't have to. So, let's see. I'm going to take a little bit of this red and a little bit of this sienna, and I'm going to go over some of this outlining even more. And actually, while I'm over there, I'm going to fix some of this a little bit. Just kind of add a little bit more contours here for the tear duct. Okay. Okay. I'm going to take a little bit of ochre. While my brush still has paint on it, I'm going to take a little bit of medium, and I'm going to go over some of this. Some of this edge a little bit. So I'm just sort of adding color, and then I'm going to take a little bit more of that pink and kind of go over. Okay, and while my brush is still kind of dirty, I'm going to take a little bit more of this white and mix it in with some of this peach, and I'm going to paint over some of this. Maybe add a little bit more ochre. A little bit more white. I'm just going to slowly blend this in together. So I'm still sort of layering, you know? Like I'm not using a lot of paint. I'm still using just a little bit of paint. Like I'm just layering paint. A little bit more white. And I'm also sort of like dry brushing into that pink. How does that feel? Does that feel okay? Actually, I think I need to round out some of this a little bit, no? Take a little bit of this red, a little bit of this sienna. I think I lost some of the curve of this eye, so I'm just gonna go over that a little bit with some white. Yeah, see? You can have the drawing down and you can still need to correct it. Take a little bit more of that white. go. There you go. It's a little bit better, right? I'm going to take a little bit more of the red and the sienna and add a little bit of my white. I'm going to run out of white soon. And add that, and maybe a little bit more of this red, and I have this instinct to kind of lean into the painting really hard, but I can't do that. Then I'll cover up what I'm doing. Let me find some white. Okay. I'm running out of white. How's everybody doing out there with this painting? Are you learning a little bit? I mean, if any of you guys are super frustrated, you should tell me. Oh, somebody's asking me, Milika's asking me if there's a reference. Yes, if you go down into the video description, down below this video, you're gonna see a place where you can download the reference. So whether or not you are painting along, like you can see what we're using. I'm using a photograph that I have from a website called Unsplash, which has a lot of free resources, free art, free photo references, which is pretty great. I use it a lot. I use it quite a bit, actually. I'm going to take a little bit of this white and just sort of, oh, that's too white. I'm going to go backwards a little bit and use some yellow, a little bit of this purple, and a little bit more white. And I'm going to just fill that in again. And then I'm going to make that dark again. And then we're going to go back and work on the actual eye, the iris, which is actually really the fun part, of course. You guys have all been waiting for this, but sometimes we get marred in with anatomy. Okay, I'm going to just use that color to fill in any of my corrections. And then I'm going to go in with my red and my sienna and paint that back in. Maybe a little bit of white. And paint some of that back in because I was trying to correct it. Hopefully I corrected it correctly. Okay. So maybe I can go back into that later because I don't think I'm able to clean up that area quite yet. So how about we work on the iris together? Oh, somebody's asking me why I didn't choose like a blue eye. Well, I found this photograph on the Unsplash website, and I thought it was really just gorgeous. That's why we're painting it today. There's no particular reason. I like the fact that the yellow was kind of cool, So here we are. This looks pretty hideous. I'm using a filbert. You guys can use anything else. I'm going to go in with some sienna. I'm going to make some sienna and some cadmium yellow light. And I'm just going to start filling this in. Also with layers, right? You can still kind of see all the sienna I had initially down there. So we're just going to try to smooth out these colors. And even then, it's probably not going to be perfect. We're going to smooth this out and gradate from like little dark to light. And I'm going to try to follow the photograph a little bit more, but you guys don't have to do an exact copy. We're not doing a copy of this photograph. We're basically using it as reference, which there is a difference. We're not painting photorealistic paintings here unless you really want to. We are using this as a reference, so it doesn't have to look exactly like the photograph. That isn't really the point of today's class, to make like super hyper realistic things. So I'm taking this ochre and taking a little bit of this umber and mixing it. And I'm just gonna so as I'm gonna be thinking as I'm painting along with you guys. So I'm kind of, at the same time that I'm painting with you guys, I'm also trying to figure out how I'm gonna get to this point again, because even though I've done it before, it's still sometimes difficult to remember how did I get to this point. So, painting is always a super challenge, no matter how many times you've done it. So I'm just going to do I'm still painting this way, right? Still painting in a circular motion. Okay, so as we go, and also when I was painting this initially, when I was painting the sample painting, I was thinking about how at some point it just sort of came together and it was kind of magical. We're going to use a little bit of this cadmium orange, which I've not touched really, and I'm going to use a little bit of it, and it's fairly translucent, and I'm going to just start to fill in parts with it. Using a little bit of medium, and I'm going to use that to fill in translucently some parts. And maybe this painting will end up being more orange than anything else, but that's okay. And I'm going to go back in. So I'm just sort of like doing this in stages, like I'm kind of working on part of it and then going back. How do you keep your paint not mixing together on canvas? Because that's my problem. Well, it won't really mix that much because this paint sort of just dries. You know, I mean, when you're painting, if it's mixing together a lot, you should just wait for your paint to dry. I mean, I don't really know if that's exactly your question. If your painting is really wet, then all the paint's gonna get like smushed together. So I'm using a little bit of this cadmium, and I'm just sort of dry brushing it in. A little bit more of this cadmium. And I think that my paint's still fairly wet because I think I think my palette's incredibly wet. So I'm using a wet palette. I have a video also on Artist Network, and I think there's a link for it down below of how to make a wet palette. So the reason why my paint is staying fairly wet on my palette is because I'm using like this palette is made up of a sponge and some paper, and so the sponge is wet underneath the paper, and then I put the paint on top of it, so it stays wet for actually quite a long time. You'd be surprised. And then I put a lid over it, you know. So when you can keep paint for like almost a couple of weeks, depending on how good your wet palette is. So I actually have a video on Artist Network showing you how to make one for yourself, and it's very inexpensive. It's just really a cellulose sponge, which costs about $1 for a pack, and some parchment paper, which I am assuming some of you guys bake, and maybe you guys have parchment paper, but you can get a pretty big roll of parchment paper for just a few dollars, and a container. Like I think most of you guys have Tupperware. So I'm using, basically it's made up of Tupperware, parchment paper, and a cellulose sponge, and then you can keep your paint wet for a pretty long time. So there we go. And then you can switch out your parchment paper when you're done using your paint, when it dries out. So, okay, it's already looking better, right? So I'm going to take some Umber, some Ochre, and actually I'm going to go right into some of this, maybe some of this purple. Or maybe that's not quite right. I'm going to go into, I'm going to wipe that off. I'm going to go into my Umber. That might be too dark, actually. Go into my Ochre and my Umber, and just start to do the outside. Like I'm losing some of this drawing, but that's okay. I'm going to paint it back in. Okay. So I'm still building it up. It's already looking a lot better, right? How are you guys all doing with this painting? I'm going to take my medium. Remember, this video is available after we broadcast live, so you guys can always watch it, including all of the other episodes that I've done so far. I think this is episode 4. And you guys can watch all the first 3 episodes and then come back next week for the 5th. Next week we're going to be painting a jellyfish, and we're going to be doing it with just a few colors, and that's going to be really fun. And for those of you guys who don't take Scott Meyer's class, his class is on Wednesdays at 3 o'clock. And that's a really, really fun class. And you guys can do a drawing class with him every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. Also on YouTube. Okay. Oh, you're waiting to see the lashes. Yes, that's going to be the fun part. That's going to be the end. So you're going to have to wait a little bit. So I'm going to go into this, this cadmium, mix it a little bit in with this ochre mix, and I'm just going to start to lighten. I'm just starting to lighten this painting. Yeah, for those of you guys who want to take all of these classes, those are super fun and free on YouTube. His archive is available, my archive is available on YouTube, and you can read a little bit more about this show. Actually, there's a landing. You can go to our landing page for Painting Together, and you can learn a little bit more about this show and also about what I do actually, and the other work I've also done with Artist Network. I actually have a couple of video series that are available on the Artist Network website, and so you can learn a little bit more about that and also about the writing I've done for them, and that's pretty great. And you guys can learn a little bit more about, obviously, this show and see what we'll be doing in future episodes. Okay, so I'm just still... So you see me, I'm just building up. I'm just building up this painting. Like, it just takes time to build it up. I'm going to take a little bit of Sienna into this. Okay. Going into picking out certain parts that I'm going to keep light and certain parts I'm going to keep dark. A little bit more. Okay. It's already getting there, right? It's already building up. It's kind of cool. I'm taking a little of this purple. So I'm just sort of bouncing around my palette a lot. I'm hoping that I can remember to let you guys know what I'm doing. I'm just taking a few more darks, and I'm taking some umber and some purple and just sort of going over parts of this to make it darker. There we go. So I'm mostly using a lot of, I got some orange in there. I'm mostly using a lot of the Sienna, the ochre, the cadmium, and bouncing back and forth. So I'm staying within like the brown colors, right? Oh, it's got funny. Going into the purple, I'm gonna use the purple to darken this part up a little bit. You're going to find that when we start adding the details, that really makes up for a lot of, like, there are some parts that I'm sort of leaving open-ended, and that's because I know that eventually I'm going to be painting over them. And, you know, when you paint a lot, you start to anticipate things like that. Like, you're like, oh, I don't have to work on so much on this part because it's going to get covered, or, you know, and that kind of really helps when you kind of think about what to anticipate. Okay, go into this ochre. And I'm just going to start to, I might actually paint in the iris so I'm not losing it so much. What do you think about that? I mean, paint in the pupil so I don't lose it. I'm going to go into, I'm going to take my small brush, and I'm going to take the brown and the purple, my umber and my purple, and I'm just going to, it's very wet, it's got a lot of water. Some purple and some umber, and I'm just going to fill that part in so I don't lose it so much. There we go. How's everybody going with their painting? Are you guys able to paint along? Okay. Oh, hello. Hello, London. It's okay to have lots of questions, you know? Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit more of this. I'm going to take a little bit more of this cadmium, mix it a little bit with this sienna, and I'm just going to start to brighten this up. I'm going to take a little bit more cadmium. It's already looking pretty good. It's getting there. Okay. So I'm just going to work on this until I can kind of make it look fairly round. So I'm just still building up. You see how many times I've gone over this? You know, like I told you, like everything is about putting layers down. Like I've gone over this several times. And the paint is only now starting to build up and look like something. So it's all patience, guys. Painting is always patience. Okay, I'm taking some cadmium, some ochre, and I'm just brushing this in. Okay, a little bit more sienna. I'm going to go in here. Maybe a little bit more cadmium. And go into there. See, a little bit more of this cadmium. So this is cadmium and this is yellow ochre. So yes, yellow ochre is a little more sandy looking. And I'm going to go into this with a little bit more. So I'm still building up the layers, you see. I'm still building up the layers. Okay. And still parts of it is still pretty wet. Okay. Maybe add a little bit of this cadmium orange. A little bit of white, cadmium orange, a little bit of this cadmium yellow. Oh yeah, the layers definitely give the painting depth. Like I emphasize this in every episode, is that you have to layer your paint in order to get it to finally be something. You know, like we are sculpting. We're kind of sculpting with paint. We're adding, we're adding, we're adding. And by doing that, you're sort of building up layers. Each translucent layer creates a little bit more depth. And even watching it, it's almost sort of, it goes from something fairly ugly to something kind of amazing once you sort of get into it. Okay, I'm going to go to this. And you know, we haven't even gotten to the little details yet. When we get to the little details, that's going to be when it's really fun. Like details are like the cherry on top. You know, they're like dessert. A little bit of umber, a little bit of this ochre, a little umber, and a little bit of this orange. And I'm just going to build this part up a little bit more. I'm going to smooth that out with a little bit of medium. Sometimes I use medium to smooth out my paint. Yeah, that's a little trick. You can use medium to smooth out your paint if it's still wet and you've messed up a little bit. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going to add a little bit more. Wait for that to dry a little bit. And while this is drying a little bit, I'm going to work on a little bit more of this side because this is getting too wet, so I keep like pushing the paint around, you know. I'm going to take a little bit of this white and a little bit of this red, and I'm going to use my brush, and I'm just going to start to demarcate little things like where the, you know, demarcate the eye. I'm just going to clean up that line a little bit. go over here and clean that up a little bit. Yeah, whenever you start to overwork an area, you're just going to be pushing paint around, especially if it's wet. So sometimes I like to kind of get away from that and just sort of get on with it, you know, move on to a different part. I'm going to take a little bit of that red, a little bit of this umber, and I'm going to clean up some of this. A little bit more white. And while that's still wet, I'm just going to use that white to mix things a little bit. Okay, just to kind of give myself something else to do so I'm not just messing around with the iris too much. And then we're going to get back to it. So I think I'm going to work on this a little bit while this is all drying. Okay, I'm going to go back into my bigger brush. I'm going to work on this a little bit while this is drying, and then we're going to go into like a really fun phase where we're working on just the eye. So, okay, I'm going to go back into this mixture, this brown mixture, a little bit of this purple, some umber, and I'm going to take some of this medium, and I'm just going to brush this way just to kind of fill this part in a little bit. Maybe take a little bit more white and mix it in with some sienna and some umber and just fill this part in a little bit because the paint was just way too thin for me. Okay, go maybe a little bit more. I'm going to lighten this part up a little bit. Oh, that's way too light. I'm going to go into that with my hand. Fix that. And I'm going to take a little bit of that medium and just push this paint around because I made a mistake. So you can kind of use medium to push the paint around a little bit. Oh yeah, you're welcome, Daniel. You can come back and watch the whole thing later. Yeah, you guys can all watch this video later. You don't have to, if any of you guys have missed anything during this live feed, you can come back and see this and all the other videos I've done. Okay, I'm just gonna push that away a little bit and there. And let's kind of work more on the eye. Let's work more on the iris, okay? Actually, I'm gonna take a little bit of this ochre and this purple and clean this up. Just kind of clean up this lid a little bit. There we go. And add a little bit more over here. Wait for that to dry. There we go. Okay. Well, that's going. Let's work on the iris, which is going to be the main event. So I'm going to take a little brush and I'm going to start taking this purple and this umber and I'm going to start adding little things like that. So look at that. This is a great time for you guys to take a look at the reference picture. So for those of you guys who are either following along or just watching, you guys can download the reference picture in the description down below the video, and you guys can check that out. So this is a great time for you guys to kind of look at the reference a little bit more. I'm going to start to add little things that are in the iris. I'm taking a little brush. I have this little brush, and anytime you feel like you've done too much, you can always sort of pat it down. So this is not there's not a real system to do this. Like, I'm basically just taking a look at the photograph and I am making decisions. Like, I'm either going to be using some of this purple or some of this ochre and mixing it with the purple or some of this this burnt umber. So I'm just kind of going I'm just going, but I'm also sort of, as I'm making marks, I'm thinking about the, okay, there we go. I'm thinking about the shape of the eyes, which is kind of goes around these little parts of the eye. So I'm taking some purple. You see, I still haven't really used any black, but we're going to use black eventually. So I'm just taking that and creating little marks. Very carefully adding little marks. I'm not adding too much. I'm not going to do too much. Taking some more of this umber. Going back. Oh, that made that very dark. I'm going to go into that and clean that up a little bit. Okay. Take a little purple, some umber. Go back in. Take a little bit of that white, and I'm just going to start to, oh. Okay, a little bit more interesting. I'm kind of like not taking too much paint, and I'm just sort of dry brushing little things around it. Okay, I'm going to go into this umber, this yellow ochre into my umber, and I'm going to just do a little bit of a highlight around the iris, just kind of see it a little bit better, kind of like a subtle thing. And I'm going to use that and just sort of create little things. And this is what I'm also going to do. I'm going to take a little bit of white, and I'm just going to start demarcating where the highlights are, and then I'm going to work around that too. I'm going to add a little bit of a highlight here. I might want to change my brush. My brush is a little bit. I'm going to use a flat brush. I'm going to use a tiny flat brush, but whatever makes you guys feel comfortable. So I'm going to go into the white again, and I'm just going to, yeah, that feels a lot better. Brush in. Here we go. Also, while I'm doing that, I'm also going to pick up a little bit of this ochre and a little bit of this sienna, blot my brush a little bit, and go into certain parts, just to kind of lighten up parts. It's already looking much more dimensional, no? Okay. It's kind of fun. I'm going to take a little bit more white, and I'm going to sort of add, I'm going to blot my brush and sort of add just a little bit more highlight. I'm going to start to dry brush. Take a little bit of yellow, take a little bit of white, and I'm going to use that to highlight too, which is going to be a little bit more fun. Dry brushing, taking a little bit of the ochre, blotting it on my papers, and then just, that's already looking kind of cool, right? So I'm just going to take a little bit of paint, and I'm just going to dry brush. Dry brush this highlight. Take a little bit of that yellow, a little bit of that white. And that's already looking kind of cool. I'm gonna add a little bit more. And this is kind of a great time. Like sometimes when I do this, I know sometimes you think that doing the highlights means like, oh, we're almost done, you know? But usually I do the highlights and then I kind of paint around it too. So I'm gonna take a little bit more yellow and this ochre and use a little bit of medium. And I'm gonna use that to go around the highlights. And blot my brush. You can't do this with too much water or too much medium. And I'm going to use a little bit of this cadmium, a little bit of white, and I'm going to use that to dry brush some of these highlights. Dry brush some of these like little details. So I'm going this way now, I'm painting this way. And I'm using a lot, I'm using some medium and I'm using very, very little yellow paint. Very, very little. Like super little. So, but this is already starting to look pretty great. And see guys, patience is virtue. So I'm using that too. See where these highlights are. I'm going over it with very, very, very translucent layers of cadmium. And just sort of very, 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 very gingerly about it. You know, I'm using very little, and I'm using some medium, I'm using some water, and I'm using this cadmium sort of like add depth to these highlights. Okay. I'm just going to use that to go this way. And I'm just sort of, right now what I'm doing is I'm glazing. So I'm taking some medium or some water and adding it to the paint, and I'm creating this sort of like translucent, very translucent layer of paint. And I'm using that to add highlights to this painting. And I'm also using my finger. There we go. Okay. I'm just adding a little bit more. And this is already looking pretty cool, right? How are you guys doing with your eye paintings? I'm going to add, I'm going to take a little bit of this ochre, this umber, a little bit of this purple, and I'm just going to keep, I'm going to keep adding little details. So it's those little details that are going to make this painting kind of cool. Add a little bit of orange, a little bit of medium, and I'm going to use that, a little bit of white, and I'm just going to use that too. Maybe a little bit more orange. There we go. It's getting pretty good. It's getting kind of exciting. A little bit more. I'm going to go back in with this white and this cadmium. And I'm going to dry brush back in some of these highlights. Yeah, it's very important to layer. This is what this whole game is about. Layering is what is going to make your painting kind of come to life. Okay, I'm going to sweep that in a little bit of that. That's looking pretty good, right, guys? Okay. I'm going to take a little dry brush, a little bit more of this white. Then I'm going to take some, I'm going to do this highlight. I'm going to work on this like highlight that's here. Let me do a little bit more. I'm going to work on this highlight, the main highlight. I'm going to wash my brush, and I'm going to take some purple, and I'm going to take some purple, I'm going to add some white to it, and that's going to be the base. I'm going to take some purple white. So my palette's very wet, actually. So when you make a wet palette, you probably shouldn't put as much water as I did, so my palette's kind of wet. So I'm going to make this purple. It's kind of like a lilac color. And then I'm going to just put like a base of purple and where I want to put the main highlight. There we go. Maybe that's a little dark. I'm going to add a little bit of purple back into that. So I'm adding these little shapes. So if you guys look at the reference photo, like it's not exactly a round shine that's there. Okay, so that's the base of it. I'm going to add a little bit more purple right here, just for fun. And maybe just right here, just for fun. And maybe right here, just for fun. Okay, so then I'm going to go clean my brush. I'm going to go right into the white. Even though there might be a little bit of purple there, it's okay on my brush. There's still a little bit of purple on my brush. I'm going to take some white, and I'm just going to add the highlight. I'm going to brush in the highlight. And my highlight is not super, super white. I don't think it needs to be. And I'm just going to add a little bit over here. That's pretty cool, right? There we go. And that, I'm going to, before we go right into, I'm going to fix up this just a little bit more before we go into doing the final touch, which is the eyelashes. I'm going to go into the, just going to clean up some of my edges. I'm going to go in with a little bit of my purple and a little bit of my red, and I'm just going to clean up these edges. Okay, just darken this part up a little bit. Go into my ochre. Oh man, guys, I'm going to add a little bit more, add a few more specks here. Because it's not, the eye is not perfect. Whew, guys, and that we just did the iris, right? So we're gonna take, hi Lynn, I'm so glad that you're enjoying the class. And Adele, yeah, this is one thing is getting real fun, right? I told you, this is like where details are gonna make everything super wild, super fun. So, oh my goodness, whew. We're like, let's take a breath. We've been doing this for 2 hours, but we're almost done. I'm gonna take my nice round brush, nice and pointy. I'm going to show you right here. This is my favorite, super pointy. And we're going to try not to mess up. I'm going to go into I'm going to take some black. Okay, I'm going to take some black, and I'm going to put a little bit of umber in it. You know, already my palette's a total mess, so it really doesn't even matter what I do at this point. I'm going to make sure that there's not a lot of paint, but it's going to be pretty loaded up. But no matter what, when you load up your brush, make sure that it's still super pointy. Okay, so are we ready? This is going to be, we're going to try not to mess up. And if we do, it's okay. I'm going to go into the ochre, and while I keep like a pretty sharp point, you know, I actually replace my rounds more than any other kind of brush because I mess up my rounds because it's really hard to maintain a good point. Okay, so I'm going to blot my brush just a little bit. I'm still going to keep it loaded up. And we're going to make these motions. We're going to go, this is about when we stop. This is about the lash line right here. And this is when everything kind of flips this way, okay? So right here we're going to do, if you make sure you look at your reference picture, all the lashes are going to go this way, and then the lashes are going to go this way. So we're going to load up a brush, and I'm just going to take a deep breath and do a lash, do a lash. And remember, like, this is the lash line. Right where we made this, that's the lash line. That's where you stop. And we're going to do a lash, and they're all going to be going the same way, but they're going to also overlap. Okay, this like black and brown mix we made. So I'm trying to keep a fairly pointy beginning. That's why I'm like, you guys have to have a good, clean round brush to do this. Okay, and we're not going to make them all going in the same direction. So sometimes we're going to make them go this way, sometimes we're going to make them go this way. And this is where they kind of overlap. This is where, so remember, this eye is a 3/4 eye. So not everything is going to go this way like in a doll. We're going to go this way, and then we're going to use perspective and go this way. So just chill out, guys. This is we're not gonna panic. We're gonna go, and I'm gonna keep loading up my brush, keep wetting my brush to keep the point. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going, and this is around the time where it sort of flips around because this is like a 3/4 eye and not a full frontal eye. And also we're gonna go backwards too, but here, we're going to start to, this is when it kind of gets tricky. So if you make sure you look at your reference picture, so at some point, these lashes actually flip this way. And remember, just this is the lash line, this lash line, so make sure to maintain the lash line. Okay, almost there. I'm trying to keep everything as neat as possible, and I'm going to go this way. And also I'm going to go backwards, see how this is all sort of like the same. I'm going to go and make these kind of overlap a little bit more. So you have a little bit of distance because everything right now looks like it's all the same. Okay. And then we're also going to see this part, it's going to be reflecting in the eye. So we're going to go and take this brown and black mixture, and then we're also going to put it in the reflection of the eye. And it's going to go this way. Also all in different directions. So this is the reflection in the eye of all the lashes. So that's looking pretty cool. Yeah, the tip of the lash line is something that's very important. You have to make sure you see where the lash line is, otherwise it's going to go everywhere. I'm going to take a little bit brown and some sienna, and I'm going to do ones that are just a little bit lighter this way. Okay, and so the bottom lashes, the bottom line of lashes, we're going to make them lighter. So I'm going to clean my brush a little bit, and I'm going to take my ochre. I'm going to take my ochre, and I'm going to use some, I'm going to take some ochre, I'm going to take some umber, and maybe a little bit of this orange, and I think this should be good. I'm going to try it out. And I'm going to make, so this is the lash line right underneath here, okay? Make sure you stay there. So when you do the lashes, they're going to go this way, and they're going to stop here. That's very important. Otherwise, they're going to be all over the place and all over the eye. So I'm going to check out this color, and let's see if it's right. Yeah, it's good. It's pretty light. I don't want to be using black on this. So we're going to be, I'm going to add a little bit more, add a little bit of medium into this. And very lightly, very subtly, we're going to add, first of all, everything goes this way, and then everything goes this way. Remember, this is a 3/4 and not a full frontal eye. And we're going to stay underneath the lash line. And we're going to try to make everything fairly random and not space them all super close together. I'm going to go back and then we're doing that. And if they're a little bit, I'm just going to go backwards so they're not all like the same distance from each other. There we go. Maybe I'll use that to also sort of clean that up a little bit. Phew, guys. that was so much fun. Is that a reflection of the eyelashes? Yes, this is a reflection of the eyelashes. So even though the eyelashes are here, they don't extend this way. And that's why this part is still without eyelashes. Okay, I made that mistake the first time I painted it too. So, oh, someone's asking me what kind of brush I'm using. So I actually have this is a Princeton round, and it's pointy, and it's a number 3. So that's what I have here. I can actually see. I actually really like this one. It kind of maintains like a good shape. As long as you clean all your brushes, they're going to maintain their shape for a decent amount of time. Okay, guys, how did you guys all do? We're going to take a minute. This was incredibly fun, incredibly challenging. So this is like super, super fun for me. I love this. I love doing this class with you guys. This is like one of my favorite things. I look forward to this every week. Okay, so I really hope you've enjoyed painting this eye with me on this eye on detail. Remember that down below is going to be a link to the Acrylic Works acrylic painting contest that Artist Network hosts every year. And if you get chosen to be a finalist, you could be featured in their yearly publication about acrylic painting. So that would be really great. Like, I hope you guys check that out, check that link out, and see if you guys want to, join in and enter your work. So this was incredibly fun. So we're going to be doing this next Thursday at 3 p.m. and for the next few weeks after that. This is going to be so great. Next week we're going to be painting a jellyfish together. We're going to be just using a few colors. So you go to the landing page for episode 5, which you could already find here, I think, on YouTube or also on the Artist Network website. You can see the list of materials you'll need for next week. So I am super excited to see you guys next week, next Thursday at 3 p.m. And I am just excited. And I really want you guys to go to the landing page and post your work. If not, if you feel shy, you can always send it to me personally. I want to see what you guys do. And I really look forward to seeing you guys next Thursday. So amazing. Have a great night. Thank you.